The golden chandeliers cast a soft, elegant glow over the marble floors of Winston & Company, one of the most exclusive luxury suit stores in Beverly Hills. The boutique was a haven for the elite, where CEOs, celebrities, and billionaires shopped for tailored perfection. The air smelled of rich Italian leather and expensive cologne, while classical music played softly in the background. Behind the polished wooden counter, Isabel Carter adjusted her sleek black dress and checked her reflection in the mirror. She had worked at Winston & Company for 3 years, and in that time, she had developed a keen eye for recognizing real customers from time wasters. To her, expensive taste came with a certain attitude, confidence, wealth, and most importantly, a look that screamed money. That's why, when the boutique's glass doors opened with a soft chime, and a man in a plain hoodie, jeans, and sneakers walked in, Isabel barely gave him a second glance. His hair was slightly messy, his face hidden under a baseball cap, and he carried himself with a casual, almost lazy posture. Another sales associate, Liam, gave a polite nod, but Isabel rolled her eyes and whispered, "Probably a tourist. Let's see how fast he leaves when he sees the prices." She didn't bother greeting him. Instead, she turned her attention back to a sharply dressed businessman, trying on a $12,000 navy blue tuxedo. "That shade complements your features perfectly, sir," she said with a dazzling smile. "Very James Bond." Meanwhile, the casually dressed man wandered around the store, running his fingers over the luxurious fabrics, inspecting suits as if he were genuinely interested. He picked up a custom-tailored black Italian wool suit, examining its craftsmanship with appreciation. Annoyed, Isabel sighed and strode over, her heels clicking against the floor. "Can I help you?" she asked, emphasizing each word as if speaking to a lost child. The man looked up, and for the first time, she noticed his sharp, familiar blue eyes. Something about him seemed oddly recognizable, but she dismissed it. "Yes," he said politely, holding up the suit. "I'd like to try this one." Isabel forced a tight-lipped smile. "Sir, our suits start at $8,000. She let the number sit in the air, expecting him to back away. "Are you sure you're in the right store?" The man chuckled, clearly unfazed. "I think so." Liam, standing nearby, suddenly looked uncomfortable, but Isabel pressed on, her patience thinning. "You might want to check out the department stores downtown," she suggested sweetly. "They have affordable suits more suited to your budget." The man raised an amused eyebrow, but said nothing. Instead, he simply smiled, a calm, knowing smile that made Isabel shift uncomfortably. Little did she know, she was seconds away from one of the biggest mistakes of her career. Isabel folded her arms, tilting her head slightly as she studied the man in front of her. She had dealt with people like him before. Window shoppers, wannabe millionaires who came into Winston & Company just to touch the luxury they could never afford. They wasted time, pretended to belong, and left empty-handed once they saw the price tags. And yet there was something about him. His presence had a quiet confidence, something unshaken by her dismissive attitude. Most men would have stammered, given an excuse, or backed off by now, but he just stood there completely unaffected. "Sir," she said again, this time a little firmer. "These suits are hand-tailored and crafted from the finest fabrics. They aren't off-the-rack pieces." She gestured subtly toward his jeans and hoodie. "Perhaps you're looking for something more casual?" The man smirked, tucking his hands into his pockets. "No, I think this suit is exactly what I need." His voice was smooth, self-assured. "Do you have it in my size?" Liam, standing a few feet away, suddenly stiffened. He seemed to recognize something that Isabel didn't. His eyes flickered between the customer and Isabel, his hands twitching at his sides, as if debating whether to intervene. Isabel, however, was far too busy enjoying her own sense of power. "We only offer personal fittings to serious buyers," she said, her voice dripping with forced politeness. The man chuckled. "And what makes someone a serious buyer?" She gave him a knowing look. "Typically, they don't walk in wearing sneakers." Liam's breath hitched slightly, but he said nothing. The man let out a quiet laugh, shaking his head as if entertained by her words. He picked up the black Italian wool suit again, running his fingers over the fabric. "You know," he mused, "a great suit isn't about what you wear walking in. It's about what you look like walking out." Isabel pursed her lips unimpressed. That's an interesting perspective. Isn't it? He replied, his tone playful. So, do you mind if I try this on? She sighed dramatically, clearly done humoring him. Fine. But we do require a card on file before bringing items to the fitting room. Liam sucked in a sharp breath. Isabel didn't notice. The man reached into his pocket, pulled out a sleek black card, and handed it to her. A Centurion American Express. The air changed. Liam's eyes widened. Isabel hesitated, the card feeling suddenly heavy in her hand. These cards weren't just rare. They were exclusive to the ultra-wealthy. The kind of people who didn't just buy suits, they bought the stores. But before she could fully process what was happening, the boutique doors swung open. A group of well-dressed men walked in, eyes instantly locking onto the nobody she had just dismissed. And then the truth began to unravel. Isabel's fingers tightened around the Centurion card as she glanced between the man in front of her and the group of sharply dressed men who had just entered. There was something off about this moment. The atmosphere in the boutique shifted, almost as if she had missed something obvious, something big. The group of men, tall, confident, and clearly accustomed to wealth, walked straight toward the casually dressed customer. And then it happened. Sir, we've been looking for you. One of the men, a distinguished older gentleman in a navy blue suit, greeted him with genuine enthusiasm. We were worried you'd left before we arrived. The man in the hoodie smirked, shifting his weight onto one foot. You know me, Robert. Had to check out the selection before you guys showed up. The group chuckled, exchanging glances like they were all in on some inside joke. Isabel stood frozen, her mind scrambling for answers. She looked at Liam, who was now pale, his eyes darting between her and the customer. Why was he so nervous? And then it hit her. That voice. Those blue eyes. Her stomach twisted. No way. With shaky fingers, she lifted the Centurion card again, staring at the name engraved on the metal surface. Thomas Cruise. Her breath caught. Tom Cruise. Her eyes shot up, locking onto the man's face again. The cap, the casual clothes, it had all thrown her off. But now, standing before her, grinning like he was in on the world's greatest secret, was the man whose face had been on billboards, movie posters, and magazine covers for decades. Her heart dropped into her stomach. She had just dismissed, mocked, and belittled one of the most famous actors in Hollywood. Liam's foot tapped anxiously against the marble floor. He had realized it much earlier, but he hadn't dared to speak up. Now it was too late. Isabel's mind raced. Could she fix this? Was there any way to undo what she had just done? Trying to keep her voice steady, she forced a smile. Mr. Cruise, I didn't recognize you. But before she could string together a full sentence, Robert, the distinguished older gentleman, spoke again. We were just discussing suits for the upcoming Met Gala, he said, turning to Tom. I assume you found something you like? Tom nodded, picking up the same black Italian wool suit he had chosen earlier. Yeah, I was looking at this one, but apparently it's only available for serious buyers. He flicked his gaze toward Isabel, amusement glinting in his eyes. The room fell silent. Liam inhaled sharply. Isabel's face burned. The words she had spoken just minutes ago now echoed in her mind like a cruel joke. Robert frowned. Is that so? His sharp eyes turned to Isabel, who felt like she was suffocating under his gaze. She had to fix this. Forcing a laugh, she scrambled to recover. Oh no, of course not. I just wasn't aware of. She stopped herself. What could she even say? There was no excuse. Tom let the silence linger for a moment longer, before placing the suit over his arm. You know, he said casually, I've always believed how someone treats people when they think they're unimportant says a lot about them. His words hit like a punch. Isabel wanted to disappear. She had been so sure that he was a nobody, so sure that she could judge a person by their clothes, so sure that she had power in this situation. And now, she stood there humiliated, while Tom Cruise, one of the most respected actors in Hollywood, exposed her own arrogance without even raising his voice. Robert turned to Liam. Can you assist Mr. Cruise with anything he needs? Liam nodded quickly. Of course, sir. He rushed forward, eager to escape the awkwardness radiating from Isabel. She swallowed hard. And just when she thought things couldn't get any worse, Tom turned back, flashing her that infamous movie star smirk. "Oh, and Isabel?" His voice was light, but his words carried weight. She flinched slightly. "Why, yes." He raised an eyebrow. "I won't be needing this." And with that, he took the Centurion card from her fingers, tucking it back into his pocket. Message received. Isabel had lost a once-in-a-lifetime sale. But more than that, she had just lost something far more valuable, her reputation. And the worst part? Everyone in that store would remember this moment forever. The air in the boutique was thick with tension. Isabel felt her heartbeat pounding in her ears as Tom Cruise turned away, leaving her standing there, humiliated and exposed. She had spent years perfecting the art of controlling high-end sales, deciding who was worthy of her attention and who wasn't. Yet, in the span of minutes, she had managed to misjudge one of the most powerful men in Hollywood. Liam, still visibly shaken, carefully guided Tom and his associates toward the fitting area, treating him with the respect and deference that Isabel had failed to show. But it wasn't over. Not yet. A few steps away, the boutique's general manager, Victor Harrington, had been quietly observing the entire ordeal from his office window. A tall, impeccably dressed man in his late 50s, Victor prided himself on the boutique's flawless reputation, a reputation that Isabel had just put at risk. Within moments, he emerged from his office, his polished leather shoes clicking sharply against the marble floor. "Isabel," he said smoothly, his voice dangerously calm. Her stomach dropped. "Sir, she started, but Victor raised a hand silencing her. "I don't want to hear excuses." He glanced toward Tom and his team, who were still discussing suit selections with Liam. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" Isabel's mouth opened, but she had no words. Victor exhaled sharply, rubbing his temple. "Tom Cruise doesn't just buy suits, Isabel. He endorses them. He wears them to global events, red carpets, magazine covers. One photo of him in a suit from our boutique could have brought in millions of dollars in brand recognition. But now," his voice lowered, "now he might never step foot in this store again." The realization hit her like a truck. She had single-handedly ruined what could have been the biggest sale and endorsement of her career. "Sir, if I could just, you will not approach Mr. Cruise again." Victor's tone left no room for negotiation. "You've embarrassed this store, and worse, you've embarrassed yourself. Effective immediately, you're suspended. Clean out your station." "Suspended?" Isabel's eyes widened. "But," Victor stepped forward, lowering his voice, "I suggest you leave quietly, Isabel. Because if Mr. Cruise files a complaint against you, I can promise you suspension will be the least of your worries." The words stung, but what made it worse was that she had no argument. She had earned this. Feeling the weight of utter humiliation, Isabel swallowed her pride, turned on her heel, and walked toward the back room. Every step felt like a death sentence. But just as she reached the staff area, she caught a glimpse of the fitting room where Liam was assisting Tom. And to her horror, Tom was looking right at her. Not with arrogance, not with anger, but with a knowing look. Like he had seen this happen 1,000 times before. Like he knew what she was feeling right now. She quickly looked away, pushing through the door. Meanwhile, in the fitting room, Liam adjusted the lapels of Tom's suit, trying to remain as professional as possible despite the chaotic energy that had overtaken the boutique. I just want to apologize, sir," Liam said nervously, tightening the cuffs. "For what happened earlier." Tom chuckled. "Not your fault, kid." Liam glanced at him through the mirror. "Still, you shouldn't have been treated that way. It was unprofessional." Tom gave a small nod. "You'd be surprised how often it happens." Liam frowned. "Wait, you mean, this isn't the first time?" Tom grinned. "You think people recognize me all the time? Not when I'm dressed like this." He gestured to his casual hoodie and jeans. "When they expect Tom Cruise, they see him. When they don't, I'm just another guy." Liam let that sink in. "People show their true selves when they don't think they need to impress someone," Tom continued. "It's always revealing." Liam hesitated before speaking. "But aren't you mad?" Tom raised an eyebrow. "You had every right to call her out, sir," Liam said. "Most people would have." Tom smiled, shaking his head. "And what would that do? Make her defensive? Make her angry? She already knows she messed up. She'll think about this moment for a long time." Liam blinked. So, you just let people realize their mistakes on their own? Tom shrugged. Sometimes, the best lesson isn't the one that's taught. It's the one that's experienced. Liam absorbed those words in silence. And for the first time, he realized that Tom Cruise wasn't just a movie star. Isabel's heart raced as she stepped out of the office, the weight of Tom's words still echoing in her mind. Welcome to the team, Isabel. Let's see what you've got. The phrase should have been encouraging, but it felt like a challenge. She had been given a chance, a real chance, to turn things around. But the question lingered. Could she actually do it? As she made her way back to the boutique, she couldn't help but replay everything that had led up to this moment. Her arrogance had nearly ruined everything. The smug satisfaction she'd felt after mocking Tom Cruise, the belief that she was untouchable. It all came crashing down the moment she realized who he truly was. Now she had to prove that she could learn, that she could overcome the mistakes of the past. When Isabel arrived, the boutique was bustling with activity. The staff had heard about the meeting, but only a few of them knew the full details. The whispers started the moment she entered. Liam was the first to approach. He seemed hesitant, but also eager for any scrap of information. How did it go? He asked, his voice laced with concern. Isabel hesitated. She could sense his curiosity, but more importantly, she could feel his judgment. He was waiting for her to fail, just like everyone else had. Everyone in her life had always doubted her, until she proved them wrong. But now the stakes were higher than ever. She locked eyes with him, the decision made. It went well, she said, forcing a smile. Tom's given me a chance to make things right. Liam's eyes widened, but he quickly masked his surprise. Really? He sounded skeptical, and Isabel caught the slight doubt in his voice. That's great. But Isabel wasn't fooled. She could tell that he didn't believe in her, just like everyone else. The doubt was there, a quiet undertone beneath his words, as if he were waiting for her to fail so he could say, I told you so. For a moment, Isabel considered breaking down, letting the weight of the situation overwhelm her. But then she remembered Tom's words. Let's see what you've got. She couldn't afford to wallow in self-pity. This was the time for action. Back at the office, Victor was waiting for her. He stood by the door, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Isabel braced herself for whatever was coming next. Did you speak with Cruise? Victor asked, his tone sharp. I did, she replied. And he's giving me a chance. Victor's eyebrows rose, but his face remained unreadable. A chance to do what? To prove myself, Isabel answered, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. Victor nodded, then pushed a thick file across the desk toward her. Here's your next task. You need to make things right with the press. You're going to host a private event at the store tomorrow, and Cruise will be there. Isabel blinked. Wait, Tom Cruise is coming to the store? Yes, and he's expecting to see a significant change in the atmosphere. Victor's eyes narrowed. You need to make sure everything runs perfectly. The media, the customers, everything. If this goes well, you'll be back in the game. If it doesn't, Victor didn't need to finish the sentence. Isabel understood the weight of the situation. This wasn't just about saving face anymore. It was about redemption. She nodded, trying to mask the swirling thoughts in her mind. I'll make it work. The next day, Isabel stood in front of the boutique, the nerves gnawing at her insides. The event was only hours away, and the pressure was suffocating. She had promised Tom that she would make things right. But now, the reality of the task was sinking in. She glanced at the staff, who were busy preparing for the event. Their faces showed the same anxiety she felt, but none of them seemed to believe that things would go smoothly. She could feel their skepticism in the air, a heavy cloud that hung over them all. Liam approached again, his brow furrowed. Are you sure about this? Tom Cruise is a big deal. What if we mess up? What if he thinks we're not ready? Isabel turned to face him, her resolve hardening. We're ready. I'm ready. Liam didn't say anything else, but the doubt in his eyes lingered. Isabel didn't let it shake her. She had learned a long time ago that self-belief was the only thing that mattered when everyone else doubted you. The event began, and the boutique quickly filled with excited chatter. The press, high-profile influencers, and a handful of loyal customers milled about, their attention focused on the high-end suits and accessories on display. Isabel moved swiftly through the crowd, making sure everything was perfect. But in the back of her mind, she could still hear the ticking clock, each second reminding her that Tom Cruise would be arriving soon. Finally, as the clock struck 4 p.m., the door opened and Tom Cruise walked in. The room seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with anticipation. Isabel's heart skipped a beat as she watched him enter, his presence undeniable. He was exactly as she remembered, composed, calm, and undeniably powerful. But this time, it wasn't just about his fame or status. It was about proving to herself that she could overcome the mistakes of her past and finally live up to the expectations that had always weighed on her. As Tom made his way through the crowd, he stopped at Isabel. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and she saw a flicker of approval in his gaze. She had no time to bask in the moment, though. She had to stay focused. "Welcome, Mr. Cruise," she said, her voice steady. "I'm honored you could join us." Tom nodded, his expression softening. "It's a pleasure, Isabel. Let's see how far you've come." Isabel swallowed hard, fighting the nerves threatening to rise again. This was her chance. Her moment. She had to prove that she was worthy of the opportunity Tom had given her. She couldn't afford to fail now. The atmosphere in the boutique shifted as Tom Cruise surveyed the event. The press were snapping pictures, the influencers were gossiping excitedly, and the guests mingled among the polished displays. But despite the glamour, Isabel couldn't shake the feeling that everything hinged on this moment. She could feel the eyes of everyone on her, silently judging her every move. She moved around the room with practiced ease, but her heart was pounding in her chest. Every smile felt forced, every handshake a calculated attempt to prove she had turned things around. But deep down, she knew this wasn't about appearances anymore. It was about earning respect. Then came the moment she had dreaded, the one where she would have to face her past mistake head-on. Tom stood at the center of the boutique, surrounded by the press. Isabel took a breath and approached him, her stomach tightening. "Mr. Cruise," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I wanted to thank you again for giving me this opportunity. It means a lot to me." Tom looked at her with a calm expression, his eyes focused but not unkind. "I'm impressed with what I'm seeing so far, Isabel," he said, his voice low but clear. "But there's still a lot to prove." His words hung in the air, and the weight of them nearly made her falter. She had been given a second chance, but now, she had to show that she was capable of more than just words. It wasn't enough to just avoid repeating her mistakes. She had to step up and deliver. Just as Isabel was about to say something, one of the reporters from the press broke in, her voice loud and cutting. "Isn't it true, Isabel, that you mocked Tom Cruise not too long ago? How do you respond to the accusations that you were dismissive of him when you didn't know his true identity?" Isabel's blood ran cold. The past had come back to haunt her. The reporter's words were a slap in the face, and the silence that followed felt suffocating. The eyes of the room were now trained on her, waiting for her to stumble. But she didn't. She didn't have time to hesitate. This was her moment, and she couldn't let it slip away. She turned to face the crowd, taking in their expectant gazes. Her hands shook slightly, but she held her ground. "Yes," she began, her voice steady but full of emotion. "I made a mistake. I judged Tom based on what I thought I knew, and I mocked him in a way that I deeply regret." The room fell silent as she continued, her words drawing the crowd in. "But that was before I learned who he truly was. And I've realized that true success isn't about wealth or status. It's about humility, integrity, and genuine respect for others." She took a breath, locking eyes with Tom. "I want to thank you, Tom, for showing me what really matters, for giving me the chance to learn and grow." Tom smiled, a knowing look in his eyes. He had been silent throughout her speech, but now he nodded slowly. "You've taken responsibility, Isabel," he said. "And that's what counts. It's never about the mistake. It's about how you handle it." The crowd seemed to relax, and Isabel felt a weight lift off her shoulders. The tension in the room had shifted. She had said what needed to be said, and the apology was genuine. But there was one more step. Isabel turned to Victor, who had been watching quietly from the sidelines. His expression was hard to read. She could feel the question hanging between them. Had she done enough? Victor walked up to her, his gaze intense. He was silent for a long moment, and the room seemed to hold its breath. Finally he nodded. "You've earned this," he said, his voice quiet but strong. A sense of relief washed over her. It wasn't over yet, but the worst of it was behind her. She had proven herself, not just to Tom, but to herself as well. The tension had finally broken, and Isabel knew that this was only the beginning of her transformation. What started as a single mistake had become a moment of growth, a testament to the power of humility, self-reflection, and redemption. The room had finally settled. The lights softened, the murmurs of the crowd turned into distant whispers, and the press slowly dispersed. It wasn't the grand applause she had imagined, but it didn't matter. Isabel knew that the moment she had been dreading, the moment when her past would catch up to her, was now over. She looked over at Tom, who was now surrounded by a few lingering reporters. Despite the lingering tension, he looked at her with a calm, composed expression. For a brief moment their eyes met, and in that silent exchange, Isabel could sense something profound, the validation of her journey, her growth. Tom had seen her at her worst, yet here she was still standing, still fighting for her place. Victor, standing just a few feet away, nodded his approval. But there was no fanfare, no exaggerated praise. That wasn't his style. Instead, he came over to Isabel, his gaze softened but still sharp. He offered a slight smile, a rare sign of his approval. "You did well," he said, his tone measured. "You owned it, Isabel. That's the first step." She exhaled a deep breath, feeling the weight of the words settle inside her. There was no hiding anymore, no more pretending. She had made a huge mistake, but she had also made the choice to take responsibility for it. And now, she could move forward. But the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. She had been given a second chance, and she knew she had to prove herself, not just to Tom or Victor, but to the people who had watched her stumble and rise again. The weight of those expectations was a lot to carry, but Isabel was no stranger to pressure. She had learned long ago that it was how you handled the struggle, the humiliation, the learning, that determined who you really were. As the event wound down, the last of the guests filtered out. Isabel found herself standing in the corner of the boutique, lost in thought. She reflected on the last few days. The arrogant woman who had looked down on Tom, the girl who thought she had all the answers. That woman no longer felt like someone she knew. She had shed that persona, not for the sake of approval, but for herself. And then there was Tom. What a strange turn of fate it had been. At first, she had mocked him, not knowing his true identity, thinking he was just another celebrity with a big ego. But now she understood. Tom had been humble, kind, and composed in a way that made her realize the value of humility. He hadn't responded with bitterness or anger, but with understanding. In a way, he had taught her more than any lecture or self-help book ever could. Isabel knew she was on the precipice of a new chapter in her life. The opportunity before her was immense, but it would take hard work, dedication, and the commitment to stay grounded. It was easy to forget that when the stakes were high, but the true test was how she carried herself once the applause faded. "Isabel, you okay?" Victor's voice broke through her thoughts. She turned to face him, trying to mask the vulnerability she felt inside. "I'm fine," she said, forcing a small smile. I think I've finally gotten it. The real lesson." Victor raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "The lesson?" "Humility," she said, her voice softening as she spoke the word aloud. "It's not just about what you know or how much you can achieve. It's about being kind, being thoughtful, respecting the people around you, and admitting when you've been wrong." I get it now." Victor's smile widened, though it was brief. "You're getting there," he said with a nod. "But remember, it's not just about understanding the lesson, it's about living it. Every day." "I will," Isabel responded firmly, the resolve in her voice unmistakable. "I promise." The night continued to fade into the early hours, and soon, only a few employees remained. Isabel looked around the boutique. It had always felt like the pinnacle of success, wealth, fame, glamour, but now it felt like a symbol of something else, a place of transformation, of second chances. "Hey," Tom called out, stepping over to her. He had left the crowd behind, and was now making his way toward her with a relaxed pace. "You did good today." Isabel couldn't help but smile at him, the tension between them easing. There was no sarcasm in his voice, no judgment, just simple recognition of her growth. "Thank you, Tom," she said quietly, "for everything. I know I was wrong, and I appreciate the chance to prove myself." Tom shrugged, a knowing glint in his eyes. "I didn't give you the chance. You earned it. You just had to decide to take it." For a moment she was speechless. Tom wasn't offering grand words of praise. And yet, what he said felt like the most valuable thing she'd heard all night. He wasn't interested in the drama, the past, or the mistakes. He was acknowledging the effort, the growth. And Isabel understood exactly what he meant. She had earned this moment, she had earned her redemption. And now it was time to move forward. The boutique grew quieter as the last of the staff filtered out, leaving Tom and Isabel standing alone. The weight of everything they'd been through settling between them. The evening had been a roller coaster. A moment of public humiliation for Isabel, a revelation of hidden truths, and the unexpected path to redemption. But as the lights dimmed and the last guest slipped away, Isabel felt a strange sense of calm. This was it, the beginning of something new. "Are you heading out?" Tom asked, breaking the silence, his voice gentle but laced with the same confidence that had grounded her through the evening. Isabel nodded, a soft smile curling on her lips. "Yeah, I think it's time. I've still got a lot to prove, but I'm ready for it." Tom's eyes softened, his usual guarded demeanor slipping slightly, as he looked at her with something close to admiration. "You've already proved more than you think. Sometimes, it's the hardest things to admit that end up being the most important. Humility, it's not about weakness. It's strength. And I think you found it." Isabel's heart swelled at his words. It wasn't about the expensive suits, the grandeur of the event, or the people watching. It was about the realization she had come to, the personal growth that no one could take away from her. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with sincerity, "for being patient with me, for showing me that humility isn't a weakness. That, sometimes it's okay to admit when you're wrong." Tom gave a light laugh, shaking his head. "It wasn't just me. It was you choosing to learn to listen. That's the real power." Isabel paused, her eyes scanning the space around her. She had been so focused on appearances, on her own pride, that she had missed the deeper truths. Now she realized, it wasn't about the fleeting moments of glory, or the desire to stand above others. It was about building something real, something lasting. "You're right," Isabel agreed, a sense of peace washing over her. "It's not the mistakes that define us. It's how we rise from them." Tom nodded, his smile reaching his eyes. "Exactly. And sometimes the best way to lead is by being the example, not the one who demands respect, but the one who earns it." As the final words lingered between them, Isabel couldn't help but feel a shift within herself. The storm had passed, and though the future was uncertain, she had learned one of the most important lessons of all. True strength didn't come from pushing others down. It came from lifting them up. "I guess I'll see you around, huh?" Isabel said, feeling a newfound lightness in her voice. "Definitely," Tom said, his tone warm. "Take care of yourself, Isabel. And take care of your future. It's yours to shape." With one final smile, Tom turned and walked toward the exit, his figure disappearing into the night. Isabel stood still for a moment longer, watching the door close behind him. She could feel the weight of everything she'd experienced, the challenges, the growth, the humbling moments. And yet, she felt ready. In that moment, Isabel understood that her journey wasn't just about the mistakes or the redemption. It was about becoming the person she wanted to be, strong, humble, and always open to change. As she stepped into the night, the cool air kissed her face, and a sense of determination filled her heart. Whatever came next, she was ready for it. Not because she had all the answers, but because she had the courage to ask the right questions and learn along the way. And with that, Isabel walked forward into her future, a little wiser, a little stronger, and a lot more humble than she had ever been before.